I'd like to call to order
Oh.
the Wednesday, January 15th, 2025 organizational meeting of the Chagrin Falls Exempted Village Schools Board of Education. Ashley, please take the roll.
Mrs. Bendel?
Here.
Mrs. Hoy?
Here.
Mrs. Miller?
Here.
Dr. Sabo?
Here.
Okay, first item is the election of president. I need nominations for president. Would anybody like to make a nomination?
I nominate Lori Bendel. Oh, yeah. Sound is a little.
Okay. Sorry, I'm writing. Any other nominations? No? Okay, we have to vote to close the nominations. Can I get a motion?
I move to close the nominations for president.
Do we need a different?
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Mrs. Bendel? This is voting to close nominations.
Yes or no?
Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Okay, nominations are closed. Now you'll vote for the election of president. When I call your name, you'll state the name of the individual you're voting for. Mrs. Bendel?
Lori Bendel?
Mrs. Hoy?
Lori Bendel.
Mrs. Miller?
Lori Bendel.
Dr. Sabo?
Lori Bendel.
Congratulations, Mrs. Bendel.
Landslide.
Okay, now election of vice president. I need nomination for vice president.
I would love to nominate one Miss Lauren Miller for Vice President.
Any other nominations? No? Okay, we'll need to vote to close the nominations. I need a motion
So moved?
and a second.
I'll second.
Mrs. Bendel? This is
Yes.
to close, okay. Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Okay, we will now vote. When I call your name, you'll state the name of the person who you were voting for. Mrs. Bendel?
Lauren Miller?
Mrs. Hoy?
Lauren Miller.
Mrs. Miller?
Lauren Miller.
Dr. Sabo?
Lauren Miller.
Congratulations, Mrs. Miller. Okay, now we can move on to 3.01.
Okay. I move to establish the presented regular board meeting dates for calendar year 2025. And just as a point here, that's a change from last year, all meetings will be held at 7 PM here in the high school library unless otherwise noted on the presented material. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Did we get any more comments or questions on the calendar? No? Ashley?
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Okay, I move to appoint Lauren Miller as the legislative liaison for 2025. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley?
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes. I move to designate the superintendent or her designee as the official district purchase agent. The designee is to include all state and federal grant programs. The designation, excuse me, is to include all state and federal grant programs. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
And I'm just going to pause for a second. If anyone has any comments on any of these, just stop me, but I'll just go ahead and to the roll otherwise. So Ashley, please take the roll.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Okay, 3.04, I move to appoint the treasurer as the records custodian and the board's official designee to attend House Bill number 9, public records training. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley?
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
3.05, I move to designate the presented firms or their successor or assigns as legal counsel for the calendar year of 2025 on an as-needed basis by the board, superintendent, or treasurer. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley?
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
3.06 is property tax complaints. I move to authorize the treasurer to tax the presented action to take the presented action regarding property tax complaints. Yes, exactly. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley?
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes. 3.07, I move to appoint the Educational Service Center of Northeast Ohio as the hearing officer for student discipline matters. In addition, the Board of Education authorizes and approves the use of designees from the Educational Service Center of Northeast Ohio to carry out investigations and hear appeals for employee matters pursuant to the board's policies and procedures. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley?
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
3.08, I move to appoint the superintendent as the representative to the Ohio School Athletic Association for matters including but not limited to student transfers. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley?
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
I move to approve the presented organizations as the official district support organizations in accordance with policy 9211. Do I have a second?
I'll second. These are just the ones we've gotten paperwork for as of right now. Okay.
Correct. Yeah, we're still waiting on some paperwork from a
Okay.
couple of them.
Yeah, we can approve additional at any time.
Later, yeah, okay, great.
Ashley, do you want to take the roll on this? Or do I have a, did I get a second?
I think I did.
Did you second?
I'll
You
second.
seconded first and then you asked.
Double second.
Okay. And Ashley, will take the roll?
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Okay, we're on to 3.10, designation of official news media. I move to designate the plaindealer.com, cleveland.com, the Chagrin Soul and Sun, and the Chagrin Valley Times as the Be it resolved that the Board of Education, in accordance with Section 3315.15 of the Ohio Revised Code, establishes a board service fund in the amount of $20,000 from the general fund. Said service fund to be used in paying the expenses of board members in the performance of their duties as official representative of the district when sent out of the district. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any questions or comments? That's a cap, by the way, not a number to use. Ashley, want to take the roll?
Yes. Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Yes.
4.02, allocation of interest. Be it resolved that the Board of Education allocates interest earnings to Fund 001, 006, 007-9204, and 401, proportionate to fund balances. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley?
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Authorization to temporarily employ personnel. Be it resolved that the Board of Education authorizes the superintendent to employ temporary personnel, including substitutes and emergency replacement personnel. Any appointments will be presented to the Board of Education for approval at the next meeting. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley?
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
4.04 is authorization to accept resignations. Be it resolved that the Board of Education authorizes the superintendent or her designee to accept resignations of any employee of the Chagrin Falls Exempted Village School District. Resignations will be submitted to the Board of Education for ratification at the next regular meeting. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley?
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes. Fiscal year 2025 tax budget. Be it resolved that the Board of Education approves the attached tax budget for the fiscal year of 2025. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley?
Yeah, I just want to point out that this is something that we do annually. This is for the next fiscal year. And once this is approved tomorrow, I will send this down to the county. The county then takes this and backs into the amounts that we need to collect for our taxes. So for the debt, we don't necessarily collect the millage that was approved. We collect less than that at this point, because as we pay down the debt, we just collect what we need to pay that debt. So they will send over a resolution and we will approve that in March, I believe. So this is just part of the whole process. So, Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Dr. Sabo,
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel,
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy.
Yes.
Okay, 4.06 is authorization to grant professional leave. Be it resolved that the Board of Education delegates to the superintendent authorization to grant professional leave to Board of Education employees to attend school business-oriented functions held either on a local, county, state, or national level, and to allow reimbursement of expenses to such employees according to the current board policies and reimbursement rates. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley?
Dr. Sabo,
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel,
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
Asset capitalization threshold. Be it resolved that the Board of Education approves the asset capitalization threshold of $5,000. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley?
Mrs. Bendel,
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Dr. Sabo.
Yes.
Okay, before I make this motion, I just want to point out that we're going to start our next meeting. This was our organizational meeting, which we're required to hold every year by statute on or before January 15th. We are wrapping that up and we are going to start, we have some people coming in to join us, some kids coming in now for the student showcase. So we're going to wait about 10 minutes and we'll be starting our next meeting at 7 o'clock. I adjourn the January 15th organizational meeting. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley?
Mrs. Hoy,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Dr. Sabo,
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel.
Yes. today or who are going to help me call the meeting to order. If you guys want to come on up, and I'm going to call to order the Wednesday, January 15th, 2025 regular meeting. Would you guys like to each bang the gavel for me, give it a good rap, and we'll get started?
Oh, here, here.
And would you please all rise and join our guests in the Pledge of Allegiance? Oh, I got to call the roll first, excuse me. I'm so excited.
Hello.
Testing? Oh, I don't like that sound.
Are we back? Okay. Okay, so I move to approve the minutes from our 12/4/24 and 12/11/24 meetings. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley?
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Okay, at this point,
That's what you sound like.
that's going to be challenging, Mike. No problem. No problem. We've got some reverb. Okay, at this point, we're going to move on to the superintendent's report, and I would like to introduce Dr. Sabo, who's going to tell us about our student showcase tonight.
Awesome. All right. So a couple of weeks ago, I had the absolute amazing honor of getting to volunteer for a couple hours at our Cleveland Food Bank with my department at work. And it was absolutely incredible getting to give back to our community in such a meaningful way with my colleagues. So that is why it's so incredible that I get to welcome y'all to this meeting. And it just warms my heart to introduce our incredible CFIS students who are here today to proudly represent one of our most community-focused organizations, PAWS, TBD on a dog that I want to be associated with it. Under the dedicated guidance of Mrs. Brosnan and Mrs. Acton, students engage in meaningful real-world service experiences that demonstrate the positive impact they can have on the world around them. Many of these activities extend beyond the Chagrin Falls community, broadening students' perspectives and fostering a spirit of service. The unwavering commitment of Carolyn and Amy to provide students with authentic learning opportunities is truly commendable, and I cannot wait to hear all about the incredible work that y'all have been doing. So without further ado, please take it away. I'm gonna move my head.
Hello, everyone. Our names are Kate,
Francis,
Henry,
Rowan, and Paige.
and we are here to tell you about PAWS, the service club at the intermediate school. We would like to thank you in advance for your undivided attention.
You might be asking yourself, what is PAWS? What does PAWS even stand for? PAWS stands for People Always Willing to Serve. We consist of students in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, and we volunteer our time to those in need.
How do we do this? We do 4 main things. First, we lead. For example, we lead many collections throughout the year and donate to local charities. Second, we make time. Mrs. Brosnan has always said that volunteerism isn't always during the times we wish them to be. Many of us have taken time after school hours and even weekends to participate in service projects. Third, we collaborate as a group and with other service organizations around Cleveland and even at the high school to help as many people as we can. Finally, we have fun. Volunteerism is a great time and one of the best ways to spend with friends.
Now we will tell you about the projects PAWS has done so far this year. In October and November, several of us went to the west side of Cleveland to help serve dinners to those without enough food. We served over 90 meals on each day, and we even helped clean up.
In October, PAWS led a school-wide collection of old sneakers to send to Got Sneakers. CFI students brought in tons of old sneakers for 1 week. We mailed over 12 huge bags of shoes. Got Sneakers recycles, sends back money, or sends nicer shoes to countries around the world for people who do not have shoes. All of our proceeds goes directly to the Chagrin Falls Community Park. We have sent over $200 so far.
One of the newest projects this year was collaboration we did with the High School Interact Club. Humble Designs is an organization that does complete makeovers of homes for those coming out of homelessness. They gave us dozens of bamboo lids to create handcrafted wall decorations. PAWS members met with the high schoolers in the Innovation Lab, and we worked with them to create adorable designs. Thank you to Mr. Volk at the Innovation Center and Mrs. Coriel and Mrs. Snyder for letting us collaborate over the 3 days.
Here are a few examples of our creations.
Our biggest project each year is the Adopt a Family project, where we come together with Student Council to adopt 2 families from Geauga Jobs and Family Services. This year, we collected over $1,800 in Target and Amazon gift cards. We had so much fun shopping to get everything on the family's wish list.
We spent one of our meetings wrapping every gift with care. Then Mrs. Brosnan and Mrs. Acton and Mrs. McNamara delivered the gifts to both families. They were so grateful.
We are now in the new year, and we still have so many upcoming projects. In February, we will be going downtown to serve the homeless a hot meal and hand out all of their basic needs. We will perform our 3rd annual variety show at Hamlet Village, where we will show off our talent and creativity for the residents. In April, we will join the CH Green team for Earth Day cleanup. In years past, we have cleaned up Forest, City Park, Playground, and Lakeview Cemetery. And finally, in May, we will collect and donate to Harvest for Hunger or Bainbridge Food Bank. You can see some of our photos from last year.
Thank you for letting us tell you all about PAWS. We hope that you have a better idea of who we are and what we do. Feel free to join us on a service project anytime.
Ta-da.
Can I ask you guys a question? Which project did you enjoy the most and why?
I like the Adopt the Family one because you get to. It's really fun to see people that can't get gifts for like the family. It's cool. It's fun giving them gifts. So on Christmas morning they can wake up and have stuff to open.
Yeah, the Adopt a Family one, because it's really fun, like wrapping all the gifts.
Oh, so you guys wrapped all the gifts? Wow.
I was going to say, your
How long did
family
that
might
take?
appreciate that.
About an hour. They're fast.
Did you use your wrapping skills for your own family presents later?
My favorite thing was the Humble Design collaboration because I really liked making all the designs for the people coming out of homelessness and for them to see like a little thing in their house.
That's so kind.
Mine was Adopt a Family because it was really fun getting to wrap the presents and see the families.
Mine was also the Adopt a Family because I liked wrapping and getting to see their reactions.
Awesome.
Oh.
Thank you guys so much for coming. This was great. Thank you. Okay, we would love to have all of you stay if you want to, but we certainly understand that you probably have homework and dinner and other things to do. So if the kids want to leave, we'll take a pause for a second, and that's fine. Good, okay. Jennifer, you want to introduce our next?
It'd be a pleasure. So this year, we were able to welcome Corey Honaki to our team. He's our principal of instruction, and he's working hard with our ELA coaches to look at the different programming that we could adopt for Chagrin schools. So he's with his team here tonight to present K-5 Benchmark Advance.
Thank you. And I'll add to not just the coaches who have been just pivotal in all of this, but really all of our K-5 teachers as well have played a huge role. Many sitting here tonight and, have been absolutely wonderful in this. So I'm going to speak and do a little bit of introduction, but then I'm going to turn it over to Mandy Marlowe, who is our 4 through 6. Okay, I had all the grades right. 4 through 6 instructional coach. Sandra Gooden, who's our pre-K through 3 instructional coach, and then Katie Attic, who is one of our 4th grade teachers. And then Jared may jump in at some point. If we forget something, he's going to run up here.
And Corey, before you start, can
Yes.
you just give us, I know you've done this once before for us, but for people who didn't see it, can you give us a minute on your background and what your role is here and, what you're doing in the district?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So my background, prior to this, I was a high school English teacher in Mayfield, had been a principal in both Mentor and Hudson, at the middle school and high school levels, and then the last 3 years was curriculum director for Summit Education Service Center. And then opportunity came to come join Chagrin, and my children are in 2nd grade and 4th grade at Gurney in the intermediate school, and not often do you get the opportunity to not only work in the district where your children go to school, but where you live, and it was certainly something I didn't want to pass up, and so got to join Jared and the wonderful team here and our teachers and board and Dr. Penzarski to be part of this work and moving forward. So
Thank you. Perfect.
so for this, just a quick overview, right? We're gonna tell you what we're gonna tell you about, then we're gonna tell you, and then we're gonna tell you what we told you about at the end. So, but our focus for all of this will be running through just sort of what the overview process of this, and just a little background for everyone who doesn't know. And I'll get into it momentarily here, but we were tasked, we as in the school district, by the state of Ohio to select a new K through 5 curriculum that aligns with the science of reading and is on the approved list from the Ohio Department of Education. So what our previous curriculum was not on that approved list by the Ohio Department of Education. So it's been really and I was picking this up sort of at the tail end of this process, but I mean, we could go back 2-3 years in terms of how this has gone through. So this has been a long, thoughtful, fruitful process, and really allowed us to think a lot about, how are we teaching English language arts K through 5. So not to put the cart before the horse, but we have landed and recommended and are recommending Benchmark Advance as the curriculum that we want to move forward with, and our team will share much more about that. I'll talk a little bit about the financial commitment towards the end of this, and then what our plan is moving forward to, because really now, as challenging and as fun at the same time as this work has been, the real work starts now, and that's moving forward and creating the plan to support our wonderful teachers in doing this. So through the lens of all this, right, we always want to go back to our strategic plan and just think about, how are we using this curriculum that we're selecting as a tool to enhance high quality learning experiences, our student and staff well-being, and then obviously this is strategic resourcing, right? We're thinking about this as a resource and how we're going to use it moving forward. So kind of keep that as a lens as you're thinking through all of this. Nick, maybe? Oh, goes that way. So I mentioned this briefly, and I will not spend much time on this, but the background of all of this, right? That through House Bill 33, the state of Ohio said, hey, we need to make sure that whatever curriculum is being taught K through 5, it needs to be on this list and it needs to be aligned with the science of reading. So 24-25 school year provided us as this period of adoption and exploration and for some of our grades piloting what this curriculum could be and picking up a lot of the work that our K through 3 team had done last winter into the spring. I'll talk a little bit about finances later, but the state of Ohio has provided us $88,000 to help support this adoption. That doesn't cover it, surprise, surprise. And if you're curious more about any of that, this link is obviously, these slides are linked in the board agenda, but there's a link there for the Science of Reading resources. So we're not going to turn this into a Scarborough's Rope presentation though. But
so
you
good.
can read more if you should choose to. All right, this is Mr. Doherty, you gave me a,
It's been a fun night.
yeah, whatever. Uh-huh. Whatever. Maybe. All right, there we go. Oh. All right, I'm turning this over to Sandra, you're taking it from here, right?
I'm going to turn over this to you. Fast on that one, so, okay. And I need to stay here.
Yeah.
With the
that'd be great.
microphone, okay. I'm a mover, so, but I'll try to.
You can take it out if you want.
Oh, can I? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Stand-up comedy, you know?
Right, okay, so as Corey mentioned, this really gave us an opportunity
And Sandra, I'm
to,
going to stop you for a second. I know you don't need an introduction, everyone knows, but could you say who you are and what role you have? Because our coach role is sort of new.
Yeah.
And every opportunity we get to sort of explain that when we're at a board meeting, I like to take it.
I love it. Okay, so my name is Sandra Gooden. I am at Gurney. I'm an instructional coach, pre-K to 3, and my focus has been on ELA as well as personalized learning. Sure. So this law that came into place and this focus on science of reading really gave us an opportunity at Gurney and the intermediate school to really evaluate what our current instructional practices were and what our ELA curriculum was. And having the opportunity to learn and review what the science of reading is and what we have learned in the last years about it, we were looking at the curriculum now with a different lens. So that was a really valuable opportunity for us. It also gave us the opportunity to collaborate within our building. So at Gurney, it was a K-5 collaboration. At the intermediate school, it was 4-5 with maybe 6. Can't speak to that entirely. And then it was a collaboration across buildings, which is something we're really working to do, is to really align Gurney and the intermediate school. So this allowed us to really work with the intermediate school and Gurney together. And really to just find a curriculum that was the best curriculum for our students and make sure that was a good fit. The team that did the collaborating, it's a list here, but it really does cover everyone at Gurney and the intermediate school that touches ELA. So it starts with the ELA grade level lead. So we had a lead at every grade level and as well as special education. Though that lead team was the front line of investigating different curriculums, taking half days to look through materials, taking full days to meet with presenters from different curriculums. There was administrators doing the same alongside us. Instructional coaches were more involved this year as they are new roles. And most importantly was also making sure we were continually getting input from our teachers. So the team leads would go back to their teams and share. If there was a curriculum, we would share the materials. We would get feedback from our teams. What does this grade really need? So the teachers as well as, everybody else on there was a part of this. So that process really began last year. So it's been a solid year, if not a little bit more of work on this. I would venture to say more. Last year, Gurney was really looking at different curriculums. That's what I was just referencing. So we were really focused on looking at curriculums. We had meetings with vendors. We had Benchmark Advance come out and talk to our teachers. And at the same time, 4th and 5th grade at the intermediate school was completing their science of reading trainings. So this fall, we came back together. That was the K-5 instructional coaches and the administrators to really think about what are we going to do going forward. We wanted Gurney and the intermediate school to really align and agree on a curriculum, K-5. So what we came up with was 4th and 5th grade was going to take that time to really look at curriculum on their own, as opposed to just hearing from Gurney what was working for us. So they spent a lot of time, a little shout out to Mandy Marlowe for really digging into lots and lots of curriculums and calling lots of people and setting up meetings with vendors and really keeping her team informed of what she was finding. They also trialed Benchmark Advance, so we've had some real experience with the program. And then on December 16th, we kind of came back together. So the ELA team leads came together with some administrators to really talk about the process we've all been through. And together, we really landed on Benchmark Advance as the program for us.
This is good. Okay, so I'll add my introduction too. I'm Mandy Marlowe, instructional coach at the intermediate school, and having previously taught all 5th and 6th grade English language arts in my career, it's been incredibly rewarding to now take this little step away from the classroom and work directly with teachers, supporting these decisions, navigating our needs, our hopes, all of these also new mandates together, this new learning, and investigating these curriculum together. So I've been, as Sandra said, supporting our teachers in our building through not just researching and examining some new curriculum, but also the piloting process. And our teachers have been incredible. 4th and 5th grade both piloted at least 2 units of Benchmark Advance this fall. So we did that, as well as engaging on our professional days with that training so that we could pilot well and truly learn the programs, while also trying to gather enough knowledge and understanding of what are the alternatives. We came into this knowing that Gurney had really invested a lot of time and research and effort in selecting what they thought was best. And so we wanted to start there, but also sort of the leave no stone unturned, though, of, well, what is, we've had great outcomes. We've had some really strong growth the last 5 years with our previous program. We'd really worked to align and develop really great things. So how do we now move into the next step together? So we evaluated what we wanted most in a curriculum. Explicit instruction in phonics, vocabulary, grammar, and comprehension. Obviously, Gurney has now implemented some really strong phonics pieces already with their foundations and Haggerty work, coming in now with a better understanding everywhere in education of the science behind how kids learn to read. We want to make sure that we're building on that and supporting that so that comprehension is there as well as strong writing. So looking at the differentiation pieces to support all of our tiers of learners, also having engaging materials. So we really wanted to look at what is engaging text? What do kids enjoy reading? What's going to promote that love of reading? Because that's been so important to us in our classrooms. That's, structured writing. And then also, I already mentioned the phonics work, but the flexibility to adapt and personalize, knowing that this is such an important piece of our strategic plan. So that led us, as we mentioned, to pilot Benchmark. The next slide talks about the other programs that we reviewed. We've spent a lot of time digging into these. This is the majority, I think, pretty thoroughly represents the list that the state, I don't know if this is exactly everything on the current state list, but this was kind of what we dug into the most. Some of these we found that almost no one in Ohio is using, and others, might be more popular around Northeast Ohio. So we have a lot of districts around us that are landing on Benchmark Advance. We saw a handful too that are looking at CKLA and Wit and Wisdom. So we had some conversations on what else did you look at? Why? And then also had a lot of calls and conversations and presentations and samples to really dig into these from all the various companies. And then I think the next slide talks about this, also utilized some of these other resources such as Ed Reports and the Reading League. There are a number of different evidence-based reviews that have been done independently. They're not every curriculum is reviewed by all of those, but we wanted to make sure that it fully meets what is expected. For example, Ed Reports looks at 3 areas. I wrote them down so I didn't forget. Text complexity and quality, building knowledge, and usability. So really trying to know, are these really good, and then digging into the materials themselves. So we also, Corey and Sandra and I went out to Hudson who had already decided on using Benchmark Advanced. We'd actually connected with them back when we dug into Lucy 5 years ago in the units of study. And so starting to foster some of those relationships and those connections with what are you doing? You know, what pieces of this are you using? How are you enhancing the curriculum? And so we've engaged, went and saw that. We've engaged in some conversations. Corey and Jared have been awesome connecting us with some of these local groups through our ESCs, especially including with Jake Miller, just to also talk with area districts on what are you choosing and how are you personalizing. So that has been really helpful because obviously I think piloting was the best way to really get to know something, but you can't pilot everything. If we did, we would be starting over each unit with our kids. And when we tried to say, okay, we piloted Benchmark, is there anything else we want to pilot? Is there anything else we want to sample? What we also don't want to do is just keep throwing different things in front of our students and not having that consistency, because obviously we know our standards and we know what our kids need, and we don't want to jump around all year making a decision. So we tried to really invest time and conversation in what seems best. And as we said, after piloting Benchmark, we feel like that takes us where we want to go. So Katie can talk about that a little bit more because she's done an amazing job navigating this with teachers.
Hi, I'm Katie Attic. I teach 4th grade. I've also taught 5th grade and 6th grade in our building, so I kind of know our age pretty well over my 25 years of teaching. So we are now in our 3rd unit of piloting. We did the first 2. We did one, we started at about the beginning of October, and then we came back and was doing our 3rd. I will say, just going into this, we did not have to go back to, we only had to pilot 2, and we chose as the 4th grade team to continue on with the materials they provided us with, because we did feel like it was impacting our students well enough. And I work with great teachers that have been really, we've been able to really work and hone in on this, because starting a new curriculum is really hard. And it is a totally different shift in how we've been teaching for the last 5 years. But we have come to this, and it's not a choice, you know, like we have to, as a district, change our curriculum. And so we've come to this point, though, where we like it enough to continue on as we came back after Christmas. So there are several components. We have the reading comprehension component. That's where one piece that we really like about the reading comprehension is that there's explicit teaching. We have a common text that we're working with all of our class in our whole class lessons, in our mini lessons, that we did not have before, where they come with magazines that the kids write in and highlight and underline and find key details, which is the annotation. They provide research projects. That each unit has a research and inquiry project, which is really great because that's where we bring in our personalized learning. Also, it's where we bring in our differentiated instruction, because there's a lot of choice that goes into the research and inquiry, and it's where kids can start, even though they're designed around, like our theme is right now is government and action of what we're reading about, they can look more and research more into what they would want to see and what parts of the government they want to focus on. And then they get to decide how they're going to present it. And so it's a very differentiated for all the different levels. Each unit is science and social studies based. I think that is really good for Gurney, because I know that it's hard to mix in, and they align well with the topics for each grade level. There's diverse, rigorous text selections. So I spent lots of time in the summer. I made a whole spreadsheet out of all the different curriculums, because I did not want to go into this year. I was very firm on, I want to make sure that we at intermediate school have a voice in this, because Gurney had already chosen last year. And so I went through everyone on the list. And one thing that what was really set on is I wanted was the text and the different types of texts that were provided. And so, and the diverse text, and being able to meet all of our students. But through that, I joined all the Facebook pages of basically every thing. And those are interesting, but one thing I will say is that we work at a high level. The texts provided are high level, but then they provide materials and text to meet all the different levels. Because most of what they told us is that all of the texts are written at the end of the fourth grade level that we do as our whole class lesson. And then through our workshop time and the other time, they provide materials to provide that differentiation. They also, we have used their writing. That's a place where we felt like we could really put in our own flair in it. We use what they're using, but it is included, but we've also been able to grow it. So fourth grade, we're taking their prompt and we're doing this whole new project. We're doing a wax museum that was allowing some of that personalization and something new that we haven't done before. Looking at how famous or historical people that have been problem solvers. And so there's rubrics, graphic organizers, all sorts of scaffolding for all different students. Vocabulary, we didn't really have we use vocabulary, but we don't have a true instruction of morphology for our building that we were focused on where we would use that. That's included. There's word study. There's really good assessments that actually, they're really difficult, but as we work through them, we've already seen the kids getting stronger at them, but they mirror the Ohio State tests almost exactly, which is a nice tool. The digital resources, lots of interactive tools. We went into this after finishing our science of reading, and so it was kind of nice to have just come off of doing that training over the summer that the grades 4 through 12 did over the summer. And so and the research shows that this fits this. I'm not sure.
You can read more of those. We don't want to not include them.
We still want to, because as one of the strategic plan was the personalized learning, we still are looking at making sure that we have student choice and voice, because when you come with a program, sometimes and we have found different areas that we have been able to provide that choice for the students. And the same idea that we're looking at assessments and making sure those fit our students and using the correct assessments to be able to make sure we're understanding where our kids best are. We also are looking at using authentic texts and novels and things like that and fitting those things in as well. I know that we're going to have professional development. We've already worked a lot together, and hopefully we'll be able to work more with Gurney as we continue to go through this. So.
You want to talk about that too? All right. Try. Again, thank you to Sandra and Mandy and Katie for presenting all of this. I said, people don't want to hear from me. They want to hear from the teachers and the people, our instructional coaches who are going to be working hard on this moving forward here. And hopefully you heard this from what they shared, but it was very telling when we got together with all of our leads back, it was December 16th, to just talk through this and say, okay, probably need to make a decision here. Where are we going? And one of the comments that was made was, will we have the opportunity to still incorporate what makes our classrooms exciting? What makes good teaching? Or are we going to have to just follow this curriculum, canned curriculum essentially? And Jared and I both looked at each other there and said, not only we have the opportunity, the expectation is that we make this what's best for Chagrin. Not what's best for Benchmark Advance, not what's best for Hudson or any of those other schools that are also adopting this. We know our students, our teachers know our students, and so we're going to look very closely and work hard to make sure that this curriculum meets our needs, not the other way around. So I just want to make sure that that's loud and clear. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this, but I want to make sure that this is out and open and transparent and all this. It's a big commitment, right? It's a large financial commitment. We asked for a 1-year quote and additionally a 5-year quote. 5-year quote that they gave us was $181,575. That is Over the course of 5 years, that's not that much money every year. So that will cover everything for us. Classroom sets, teacher guides for all of this, the take-home decodable books, that was a nice feature of all this. We liked the fact that we could put things in our kids' hands, that it wasn't just digital, because there were a lot of curriculums we looked at that was very heavily digital. Teacher resources, there's also intervention packages that come with it. We're also exploring other intervention programs and packages as well, but that's a separate thing. And as I mentioned before, there is also $88,000 coming from the state that we've received to help subsidize this purchase. We like the 5-year commitment to it, especially because 1-year one just doesn't feel like it's a real commitment. That was also only about $30,000 less, so that didn't make a lot of sense. But as we talk through this, and I've worked with other districts on curriculum adoption and things, year one is just figuring this out, right? We're gonna support our teachers, through our coaches, through everything we can to make sure this goes as smoothly as possible. So then year two is, okay, we've done it, now we're tweaking. Year three is hopefully feeling really good about it, and then you have 4 and 5 to start saying, is this working the way we want it to, or do we need to explore something else? So 5 years feels pretty good there. There's just a quick breakdown so you understand too where all the money is going for this. So the large percentage, 3/4 of it is the classroom materials, consumables, the digital subscriptions. There is a shipping cost in all of this, not a small one.
I'm going to ask you a question
Yes.
I never would have asked a few years ago,
Yeah.
but now I'm going to ask it. Is there a chance that the program, how confident are we that these programs are going to stay on the list and that the list of programs aren't going to change over the course of the next few years? I know there's comfort probably in the fact that a lot of other schools are adopting this same one.
Yep, yeah. I would be surprised, but I've been surprised before.
Okay.
5 years ago, adopting Lucy, I don't think anybody thought we'd be standing here at this point right now, right? So I can't say anything with certainty because our state legislator, I'm not, but things can change depending on how it goes. But I think the research supports this. I think the state of Ohio has already been recognized nationally as being a leader. Other states are looking towards Ohio as a guide for how to adopt and implement this science of reading based instruction statewide. So I would be very, very surprised if we did see a significant shift from this.
Great. And are we seeing surrounding districts also making the 5-year commitment to the program? Okay.
Yeah, yep. So, no, it's a great question though. I think I already addressed that, but just leave that there for a second just to make sure. All right. And okay, so plan moving forward, right? And again, this is in a rough draft form. We're going to be spending the next probably couple of weeks here trying to hammer this out and really say what's going to be best for our staff, what's going to be best to support them. Because what we want to see happen here is between now and the end of the school year, enough time given to our staff in order to, one, our 4th and 5th grade teachers, because they were doing more of an in-depth pilot, they got a half day. Was it a half day or a full day that they, with the trainer? It was a half day, and then they had time to work on it. Yeah. So we want to provide that to our K-3 team as well, our teachers, to really be able to work with a representative from Benchmark Advance, a trainer. They're including in our purchase 3 days of gratis PD. So we want to make sure that that support is given to them. And then time also to work together, to work with our 4th and 5th grade teachers. So we have everybody working together on this to figure out, okay, how do things stand? So by the time April or May rolls around, we can assess what needs to be done during the summer, so that when August rolls around, really those first 5 days, we have some time committed to it to refine, prep for the school year. But ideally, I want everyone to feel pretty good probably about where they're going for the next 2, 3, 4 months when we hit the ground running come August, and then continuing to provide that support throughout the 25-26 school year, including at least quarterly, if not more, having some of these work sessions, getting together, finding opportunities for K-5 to be able to have those conversations together. It's gonna be really critical because again, we want we want to see this alignment, K through 12, but certainly K through 5, and this is a great opportunity for us to do that. And maybe, okay, so quick wrap up, right? Benchmark Advance, we are committed to this. We're committed to making this the best possible program for our students in Chagrin. And then we have the long-term value to it, and obviously just spoke about the next step. So I wanted to open to any questions for me, for our team. Jared, was there anything? You good over there? All right, good.
So Katie, can I ask you a question? So this seems like it's a big lift for any teacher, K through 5, all new material, all of that. But in particular, for 3rd, 4th, 5th grade teachers where the kids, is there like an on-ramp for the kids to transition from what they knew before to this new material? I mean, how do the teachers, how are the teachers supported to identify and fill those gaps? Are there a lot of gaps? And what is, it seems like in the first few years, that could be a real issue for the kids who are coming in midway through the program.
It's interesting. We did have those conversations, especially as the first unit, because of just them expecting things that they had done the years before,
Right.
As the program grows. And we do just have to kind of fill the gaps. There's nothing in the program, although we are seeing, even as we're going into Unit 3, how much smoother it already is.
Okay.
And so where the beginning, I'll say the first assessment, our kids did not do very well on. And then, but we've seen them grow on the assessments and grow with how they're able to annotate and things like that. So we've definitely have, even just this year, been able to help fix some of those things that just where those gaps were, so.
And do you feel like there's enough opportunity? Again, I know everybody in this room is really aware of what this looks like, but we had to choose from a list of programs, and there were great programs on the list, but it's not designed for our students in particular. It's designed for, the average Ohio or average national student. Do you feel like there's enough flexibility, or what types of things are built into it so you can meet the needs of our kids who master material really quickly, or our kids who might need some pullout and developmental differences as far as where they are when they hit the program?
One thing I ended up, after we looked at all the other programs, was the flexibility in this program, and I think that's what led Gurney to liking it the most as well, because number one, we come with the readings and the things that we can mark up, but it doesn't come with a big workbook where you feel like you have to do like every page of a workbook, and that you can, choose the questions that are best fit your kids, but they also come with differentiated materials and reading and questions and things like that that you could provide for your students. They come with differentiated readers' theaters and all different types of things that you can use to meet all different levels.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Jared will probably love me for this. Not sorry. As the data analytics person, is there a measurement strategy that we're thinking about or putting into place in order to say like, hey, what is the impact of this program? Are there opportunities to course correct if we're getting like substantial data back that something isn't working correctly or isn't working correctly in, I guess, the kind of transition between our schools?
Okay. I can talk.
I know that you all will have incredible like lived experiences in order to give back to us, but sort of, both that qualitative, quantitative
Absolutely.
feedback.
Well, the qualitative will be probably easier, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we'll hear that, we'll see that. The 4th grade and 5th grade teams I know already have. I think one of the teachers even said to one of us, like, wow, I know my students better as readers, just in these last couple of weeks working with this program and having some of this content and this material than I have before. The quantitative side of it, I mean, obviously I can point to state test scores. We can point to, some of our formative and summative assessments as we go throughout these units and throughout the year to see how they're progressing. And those are all completely valid quantitative measures for us to be able to use. We'll also want to look at, and we see it already some, I think with, I think the 4th graders currently, or the 5th graders, and correct me if I'm wrong on which one it is, who began some of the phonics work and the Haggerty and the foundations. So you're starting to see also as that, initiative has gone up the years and the differences in how students are performing in that Benchmark also has a quantitative tool built into it as well. Yes, so, yeah, absolutely. And a lot of those programs that we looked at, certainly the bigger ones, the HMH, the Interreading, the CKLA, the Wit and Wisdom, those all have that built in there. But again, that's a nice measure for us to be able to use, to be able to see, hey, how are our students growing? I mean, our students achieve, right? Like, achievement is great. Our students do it. We see it on the state test every year. It's, why our district is ranked where it is on that. But that is only one of the metrics, and we really want to look at the growth piece too. So if there's anything.
I was just going to say, we also iReady test 3 times a year. So continuing those same assessment tools, as well as some of the additional ones that we've now built in to identify needs, to place students in interventions and things, it'll be nice to compare that over time. And we can pull that data in iReady and look next year by fall and by winter and see, are we still where we want to be? If there were a dip in a certain area, why? Then we'll be able to also evaluate, is it the fiction? Is it the nonfiction? Where is it, because we are going to be making changes, and you won't necessarily know, and things build. So, we're going to touch on some standards early in the year and then come back to them in February. We certainly don't ever wait until the state tests to know if what we're doing is right. But I think that'll be the nice thing, is some of the intervention tools that we already have in place will continue, as well as using these new assessment tools that are built in to the program.
Thank you guys so much.
Oh, go ahead, Laura.
I just, looking at the plan to moving forward, so in a hypothetical situation where we're very happy with benchmark advance, are there opportunities at the higher grades in the 6 through 12 to continue that same type of instruction with this, especially since we're starting in 4th and 5th, when our, current 4th graders hit 6th grade, is that going to be an opportunity for them? Crystal ball, please.
Crystal ball, yes, right. Let me just, we have that down in the other office downstairs. No, and that's a great question, and that's kind of the next step with all this, right? And I'll give you a perfect example. Friday, unless the weather does something crazy, but no, Friday, Friday we are having meetings district-wide on the PD day, one of which I'll get to be a part of is our 612 ELA teachers getting together.
That's exciting.
So I'm very excited about it, all the meetings, but that's the next conversation to happen here, right? So we have this wonderful, excellent direction. We know where our K-5 team is going in terms of literacy and ELA. Now we need to continue that conversation 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, all the way up. So yes.
Yes, great. Thank you.
I'm sorry, last question. Do we have a plan? I know a lot of our parents have been really paying a lot of attention to this and listening to the podcasts, and people understand the significance and the importance of the shift to the science of reading and all of that. But do we have any plan, or can we consider pushing information out to parents? So when they're seeing new materials coming home and their, new homework and things look a little bit different, they know what's coming?
Yep. Yeah. I don't know if anybody else wants to speak to it, but the communication is going to be a huge piece to this.
Okay.
This was step one.
Right.
So get it in front of our board and everyone's here tonight and listening
so many
online.
people watch these meetings, so I'm sure
I
everyone's
know,
gonna
so
know.
that everyone will know all the answers to those questions. But yes, the next step is, once this is approved and ready to go, then, okay, here is what parents, students, community, we can expect moving forward here. So yes, that is
Awesome.
very cognizant of how important that is.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for taking time to do this and for all your hard work and all the work of the teachers to make this happen. And we're excited to hear more about it. Maybe you guys can come back and give us an update. We'll wait a while, but when you feel ready, we'd love to hear more. Thanks.
Yeah, I want to celebrate you. I feel like they need to be applauded, we applaud the students.
So much work.
Thank.
Okay, Ashley, do we have anyone signed up for an agenda item for public participation?
Not for the first section.
Okay.
We will for the second.
So we're on to we have no consent agenda items at tonight's meeting, so next up is our superintendent recommendations. I'd like to make a motion to approve the district calendar. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
So the feedback was good, and it's standing as it was presented in November, so we should be.
Great. Ashley?
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
I make a motion to adopt policy 2265 and revise policies 2340, 5136.01, and 6460 as presented. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
So some of these are just required by current House bills, House Bill 214, House Bill 432, Policy 2340. That one just was to do some alignment to match our practices on field trip. Because we transitioned from OSBA to Neola, plus now we have a whole set of guidelines of how to implement district-wide. There are still some tweaks to make sure that when we have those, that everything is aligned to our current practice.
Great. Yeah, this was just a reminder for everyone. We transitioned our provider of policy. We wrote all of our policies last year and have been working on guidelines, which was an enormous lift for our team. So you'll still see these little adjustments coming through with policy, but we're basically, that's behind us for the most part. And now we're just including updates as they come from the state. Every time there's a new bill, every time there's a change at the state level, you'll see that flow through into policy. Ashley, you want to take the roll on that one?
Yes. Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes. 5.03, I move to approve the proposal for the extended student trip to China. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I've heard great things about the trip in the past, and I know Annie is super excited about this trip, so
Yeah.
I think it'll be great for our students.
I know our kids had a great time the last time. Ashley?
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Okay, 5.04 is administrative personnel interim principal at Gurney Elementary School. I move to approve the employment of Ava O'Mara, interim principal, Gurney Elementary, for a maximum of 115 days through June 30th, 2025, at $475 per day. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
So pretty exciting. When we posted for the interim, we had 6 applicants. Those applicants were interviewed by our administrative team. They narrowed it down to 2 candidates, which then were interviewed in a second round by a collaborative of our administrative team, teachers, coaches. And so a decision was made and the offer was made to Ava. And I think that she'll be a really nice fit to where we're headed these next couple of months. Because remember, we're still posting and creating that profile for our principal for 2025. So Ava comes to us with extensive background at the elementary school level. She was at Highland Drive Elementary in Brecksville, Broadview Heights, and was recognized as a U.S. Department of Education Blue Ribbon School. Her career in education encompasses roles as an art teacher at all levels. She's been an assistant principal at both the high school, middle school levels, and then most recently, she's helped facilitate the transition of students to a newly constructed elementary building as an elementary principal. She also has extensive experience. I say extensive experience, but when you've done a couple interims, we can say that, doing the interim position and what that looks like. So she's been recognized as the Northeast Ohio Education Association's Educator of the Year, recipient of the Parent School Organization Friend of Education Award. I just think it's really going to be a good fit. We're working with Dr. Jones right now to make sure that we can get everything transitioned. We're putting a transition team in place to ensure the success for that, for our students first and our staff, and also our school community, our parents. So all 3 frames are being looked at. The other thing I just want to share with you, you'll see it says a maximum of 115 days up to June 30th. So the reason that you typically pay either by the hour or by the day for an interim contract to an interim person. And so we wanted to give enough days to ensure that any time, pending that you approve the recommendation, anytime between tomorrow And June 30th, we could have her, we're going to sit down and create the calendar of transition. Because we also have to think forward that should we put a new principal, which we will, at Gurney, there's going to be transition again to kind of monitor and navigate. So we wanted to be able to offer her days in June after school to be able to do any kind of transition that might be necessary. We're very lucky because we also have Brittany CC and that assistant principal right now to do everything. The other questions that have been asked are what other supports do we have in place for staff? And we have my whole team. So especially the student advancement team, Jared and Corey and Sarah have been in the buildings, especially Gurney doing supports. Jen Banka, our director of people services, is there. So we're going to ensure that everything is absolutely as smooth as possible. But I think Ava will be a really nice addition to help us with that.
Great.
Any questions about this recommendation?
Ashley?
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes. Okay, 5.05, I move to accept staff resignations as presented. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley?
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes. 5.06, I move to approve the following supplemental payments to certified and classified staff as presented. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley, or do you want to?
Well, I just want to mention one thing. At the beginning, you'll see that there was a pay for interviews for some of the staff to participate. They were such good interviews, we ran over a little bit. So that's where that little bit comes in, but we're so thankful that they participated. I think everything else is typical.
Ashley?
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes. Okay, 5.07, I'd like to make a motion to hire the following classified staff as presented, contingent upon meeting all requirements. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley?
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
5.08, classified personnel. I'd like to make a motion to approve the following classified staff contract as presented, contingent upon meeting all requirements. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley?
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
5.09, I'd like to make a motion to approve the following individuals as substitute teachers on an as-needed basis for the 2024-2025 school year, so that's the remainder of this year. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley?
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
5.10, exempt personnel, salary adjustments. I'd like to make a motion to approve the following exempt employee annual salaries for fiscal year 2025, retroactive to July 1st, 2024. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley?
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes. I'd like to make a motion to approve the following payments for chaperone responsibilities for a community education program as presented. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley, or do you want to?
Well, the only thing I want to just mention is we're not adding, just to be clear, another position. It's just that we have one of our current people that are unable to participate, and so we need to put in another contract, if you will, to cover a chaperone.
So it's just for the one date?
For the one date.
Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to be sure.
Ashley?
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Item 5.12, event helpers. This is a concert accompanist. I'd like to make a motion to approve the following payments for concert accompanist as presented. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley?
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
And just to make a note here to acknowledge our support organization, these payments are reimbursed through the Music Association program.
So appreciated.
Okay, 5.13, athletics. I'd like to make a motion to approve the following one-time payment for OHSAA tournament responsibilities. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley?
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
5.14 is auditorium equipment manager. I'd like to make a motion to approve the following individual as an auditorium equipment manager contingent upon meeting all requirements. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley?
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes. 5.15, volunteers. I make a motion to approve the following volunteer contingent upon meeting all requirements. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley?
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Okay, this contract with Achievement Advantage Assessment and Services for evaluation services on an ongoing basis as needed.
And it's missing the words motion.
Yes,
to
so I'm going to make a
approve.
motion to approve that contract. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any questions on this one? Ashley?
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
5.17, I'd like to make a motion to approve the contract with Learn 21 for data privacy services effective through January 2027 as presented. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any questions? Any questions for Mike? Nope, okay. Ashley?
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
5.18, I'd like to make a motion to approve the contract with Thrive Early Learning Center for consulting services effective December 4th, 2024 through June 30th, 2025 as presented. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley?
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes. 519, this is a contract with the Trumbull County Educational Service Center. I'd like to make a motion to approve the contract with the Trumbull County Educational Service Center for support services effective August 1st, 2024 through July 31st, 2025 as presented. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Jennifer, this is the second time we've heard Educational Service Center. And Corey mentioned that he had worked with the Educational Service Center for Summit County. Can you just take a second and explain
Sure,
what that
so
is?
the state has different regions and there are consortiums, if you will, that serve school districts. And a lot of it is to ensure that you have depth in people, in networking among who are in that educational service center. Plus, sometimes there are unique programs, or you might have this situation where you might need this thing, and one school district may not have that. So an ESC is somewhere that we can go to for those kind of services. So you'll see like Jen Banco, as Director of Pupil Services, will have a lot of connections with ESCs. And the ESC of Northeast Ohio will be the primary ESC because we're in Cuyahoga Falls. But we also use the Western Reserve, which would be Geauga County. We also use Summit County, that's where personalized learning, where Jake Miller comes from. So it's just those kind of nice specialized services and programs that districts need that you wouldn't necessarily have a full-time.
So we're not
piece or
hiring
part
someone,
for.
so it's a cost-effective
No.
way to bring in expertise. that-
It's the same thing right now that we're doing with gifted. So we know that we need to take a deep dive into gifted based on strategic planning and all of the roundtables that we've been doing. And so we worked with the ESC to help us place Kathy Mack to be able to do the audit, if you will, of everything with gifted. And the nice piece about that, it's not just one person that's looking at Chagrin, it's the ESC as well. So all the supports that they have for gifted services for Cuyahoga County are also supporting Kathy and supporting Chagrin. So when you have those kind of situations where I need this, or this would better help us grow, instead of having to hire a person, right? Because we're not even sure really what we need as far as those services, what they'll end up looking like.
Right.
We're just getting that data finalized. But having that person and that resource and the ability to work with an ESC
Okay.
is crucial. So every time you say ESC, and then they each have their own symbol, Northeast Ohio is NEO.
Okay. And those are state, what's the structure of the ESCs? Those are state funded or those are?
They're regional. I think they do receive some state funding,
Okay.
but
And the schools each contribute, is that, okay,
yeah, we pay for membership and then we pay for services.
okay,
But still, again, it's cost effective because, we don't have to hire the full-time person plus benefits and all those things. Most employees through the ESCs will receive benefits, so we pay for our portion of it, but if their time is split between us and, 2 other districts, everybody else is chipping in too.
got it, thank you. I don't remember where I left off, I think we need to take the roll. Do we have a motion in a second?
We do.
Okay.
We're gonna take the roll. Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
Dr. Sabo.
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel.
Yes.
Mrs. Soy.
Yes.
Okay, so now we're on to 5.20, which is the Educational Service Center of Northeast Ohio. I move to approve the contract with the Educational Service Center of Northeast Ohio for services effective July 1st, 2025 through June 30th, 2027, as presented. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley?
Dr. Sabo.
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy.
Yes.
Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
Okay, I move to approve the contract with Kent State University for CCP services for the 2025-2026 school year. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so this one,
This one is with Kent.
okay,
But it doesn't mean that that's the only school that we have the opportunity for. It also means that we approve these as we get them. So it's not just a bulk. You'll see these come throughout probably the next couple of meetings to approve, but parents can go to any, have their child go to any university that's through the CCP program.
right, so our approving the contract doesn't limit parent choice
it does
in
not.
which of the CCP-approved institutions they can use. Ashley?
Mrs. Bendel.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy.
Yes.
Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
Dr. Sabo.
Yes.
Okay, and I think that's it for superintendent recommendations, if I'm right here. And so Ashley, treasurer recommendations. I move to approve the disposal of equipment as listed in the attachment. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any questions? Ashley, you want to take the roll?
Mrs. Hoy.
Yes.
Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
Dr. Sabo.
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel.
Yes. I move to approve the then and now certificates as listed below. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
She'll second.
Ashley?
Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
Dr. Sabo.
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy.
Yes.
And I move to approve the monthly financial reports. Do I have a second?
I will second.
And Ashley, you want to walk us through these?
I do. I first want to say I am not disgusted or bored with what's happening here tonight. I have a migraine and I have a big hole in my vision right here. So if I keep turning my head or am closing my eyes, that's why I'm trying to see what I'm doing here. Okay. All right. Am I on? Okay. So with December, there are some extra procedures that we have to do to close the month with 1099 reporting and things like that. So December was actually just closed this past week, so I don't have December financial reports yet for you. I'm going to cover November because we were a month behind in December as well because the December meeting was early in the month. So I'm going to cover some November stuff. I'm going to fly through these first few slides because this is a little bit old information here, and there's not too much to talk about that happens in November financially for the school district. So here's the summary of the general fund. We have had $23 million as a fund balance at the end of the month. You can see the deficit for the month of 2.6 million. That's pretty consistent with what we expect because we don't get hardly any revenue in November because we're not receiving our taxes in November. We've already gotten all of our fall taxes. This is a comparison of the year-to-date where we have been in November in previous years. So the orange is the current year. You can see slightly down from last year, but up from previous years. Again, like I said, not a whole lot of activity here. You can see here, November, very little revenue to talk about. Expenditures, again, orange is the current year. This is where comparing to prior years of where we would have been in November of those prior years. Again, orange is the current year. This is the month-to-month comparison. So we are looking, if I can get my little, oh, sorry, I need a mouse. Right here is what we're looking at for November. Cash fund balance, again, all of the gray is prior years, orange is the current year. You can see that $23 million that I talked about on the very first slide, that's our fund balance. It will go down again next month, and then the following month, and then it'll tick up as we get our taxes in the spring. Self-insurance fund, this has stayed fairly consistent, very flat. We're at about $2.3 million. We have been for several months. That's where we want to be. This slide is exactly what we hoped when we implemented this, and then over the last last few years anyway. That dip there again, I always like to point that out because it looks, it's kind of an inconsistency there. That's that month last year where we did the holiday. Financial summary of all funds, all of the previous slides other than that self-insurance fund, all of those, when I was talking general, when I was talking revenue expenditure, all of those graphs were general fund only. This is all of our funds. So again, this 23 million will correspond to all of those other slides, and then all of these other funds down here make up the $30 million that's in the bank. This is where all of our money is held. The green here is our Star Ohio account, and then this orange is our managed investment account. Okay, financial spotlight. So in December, the CUP report came out. It comes out every December. And if you have not looked at the CUP report before, it's now called the profile report, but it's still in several instances in different places on the website called the CUP report. It has all kinds of data and information comparing every single public school in Ohio. So I have a link to it here, and I'm going to take you to it in a minute. But the one thing that we're asked most about that I can compare to other districts is salary. And we're always asked about our neighboring districts. I'm going to show you how you can pull up any district you would like, and you can compare us to anybody, but what I pulled together for tonight is all of our neighboring districts in Cuyahoga and Geauga counties. All of these graphs that I'm going to show you tonight, the blue is all of the other districts, orange obviously is us, and then green is the average of all of the districts that I'm presenting here. So this first one is classroom teacher average salary. So there are a lot of things that go into the average salary. You can compare just the average, but you have to consider the number of years experience that you have for your teachers. So some districts are going to have a higher average because they have more experienced teachers. There are going to be some districts who are, kind of those stepping stone districts where teachers will go and kind of get their feet wet and then they'll move on. Those districts are always going to have a lower average salary because teachers don't stay there. So this shows all of the districts in Cuyahoga and Geauga. Like I said, orange is us. We are slightly above average, but we are certainly not the highest paid in the two counties. So a lot of things to consider when you're looking at that. It's just one data point. The other category that they have on the CUP report that I can present to you is administrators' average salary. Again, there are a lot of things that go into this, a lot of variables that will change this number as far as what some people consider administration. Not every district considers every position administration. The number of administrators as well, and salary, obviously. So you can see here, all of the same districts. We're still the orange here. We're slightly below the average, or the local average. But again, this is not the average in the state. This is just the average of our neighboring districts. Because you can't really consider salaries from every area in the district to be equal, because cost of living is different all over. So I like to kind of present just the ones around here. The ones that I'm most asked about are just neighboring districts. Those are here, obviously, you know, our Kenston, people like to compare us to Kenston, West G, Orange, Solon. Those are all here, so.
And Ashley, I
Yes.
know size of district impacts salaries for
Administrators, certainly.
in particular.
Yeah.
Okay. So the bigger the district, the higher the salary usually for administrators.
Higher salary, yes. Typically, they have more students as well. So they're gonna get, on the other side of it, to bring the averages down a little bit, they're gonna get some economies of scale there. So they're, you know, maybe only gonna have, in a school district of our size, we only have, you know, one principal, one assistant principal. In a larger school, a larger high school, you might have a principal and, you know, or you might have two principals. You might have one for, you know, 9 and 10 and one for 11 and 12, or you might have assistant principals for every grade, or, you know, depending on how they're structured. What all of this does is it tries to get us as close to apples comparisons as we can get in the state, but it's never going to be totally apples to apples. Every district is structured different. Like, we call things different things. We divide out our responsibilities differently, but this is as close as we can get. And when we do get asked about how do we compare salary-wise, this is what we have, you know, to use. On the administrator side, they give us another data point that is interesting. Am I going the wrong direction here? Sorry, I'm like trying to find where my arrow is on my screen. They give us another data point, which is administrator expenditure per pupil. So they take that and then they take the total administrator expenditure, divide it obviously by the number of pupils. So again, a lot of variables that are going to go into this to affect this. You know, a district like us, we have 1,500 kids compared to, you know, a city of Cleveland who has, I think they're, what, 60,000 or something like that. Obviously, it's going to affect that number. The numbers that we do have, though, if you see, we're pretty much in the middle of where that administrator expenditure per pupil is. When I show you the actual CUP report in a few minutes, you can see they've got the the expenditure per pupil broken down in different categories. This is just one of the categories. But I think it's an interesting data point. This looks a little busy. What I've done here is taken this chart here. So these are in all the same order. And then added this line here. So the line represents the percentage of the total expenditure per pupil. So if you're just looking at dollar amount, this is the, you know, East Cleveland is the highest. Come down here, what is that? North Royalton is the lowest. But that's not necessarily, that's just dollar amount. When you're talking about the percentage of your total that you spend, you get a different amount. So these are not in the same order. Clearly, you can see that number going up and down from as high as 25% down to as low as 10%. So ours is about 14.5%. Also, just something I think is interesting. Not going to really make any big conclusions on it, but I think it's interesting information. Okay, every one of these slides has a link here to the CUP report. Can also, if you just go on ODE's website and search CUP or district profile report, This is where it's gonna take, the link is gonna take you. We have all of the previous years here if you really wanna dig into some data, if you're really a data nerd and you're into it. It's really kind of fun. You're gonna scroll down to the middle here, and this is where you're gonna find the actual current report. It's gonna download for you. We'll pull it up. So down here in these tabs, so the first tab is the district profile report. So this, you can go in here and drop down and pull up any district you want. And then over in these columns here, you can add other districts. So, you know, if you're like, Ashley, look, I don't really care about all of the Geauga and Cuyahoga counties. I really want to know how we compare to, you know, we get asked about Indian Hill a lot. They're a similar district. They achieve at high levels like we do. So that's one that a lot of people want to compare to. If you want to do that, you can pull our information up in here. If you can see the arrow and function. You can pull us up in here and then any other district over here. What that's going to do is pull from this tab. Why is it not letting me do it? It's trying. Yeah, it's not responding. Lovely. Okay. Well, it gives you a giant spreadsheet with all kinds of data. It lists all 600 plus districts in the state, and it has all kinds of really cool information. It'll have number of students. It'll have statistic breakdowns for how many teachers we have with 0 to 5 years of experience, how many we have with 6 to 10, how many we have over that. It'll give you information like how much does 1 mill raise per student. So, you know, when you're comparing, when you're talking millage and you look at one district and say, well, this district has a much higher millage than District B, that may be because District B has much more property value. So 1 mill is going to bring in a heck of a lot more money than 1 mill over in this other district. So you can compare all of these kinds of things. Really was excited about showing it to you tonight. And it's not cooperating with me, but go out there and play with it if you're interested. It really is kind of cool. You can pull up all kinds of information and learn things about 600 plus districts, or just, you know, the 1 or 2 that you might be interested in. So sorry about my computer not functioning here, but it's kind of cool. Take a look at it. If you do look at something, you want to kind of ask some questions about how to interpret something, or, you know, what should I look at here? Give me a call and I would love to sit down and go through it when my computer's cooperating. So sorry about that. As soon as I turn it off or unplug it, it's going to be like, here you go. Okay, so that is it for me.
Great. Any questions on any of that? Ashley, you want to take the roll?
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Okay, any other business? No? Okay, we've reached the time for public participation. We have people signed up for public
We
participation?
do.
How many?
1, 2. I have 2 lists here I have to combine.
4. Okay, so this is the time, and I'm going to go through this whole disclosure because this is relatively new for us. We have divided our public participation into 2 sections. The first time, which is earlier in the meeting, is for items which are on the agenda so that we have the opportunity to hear from people before we vote on items. The second, many districts just have agenda item public participation. We wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity to hear from people on things that were not on the agenda. So at the end of the meeting, we've added a public participation section for non-agenda items. And now I know you've heard me a lot tonight, but you have to listen to me read this disclosure. The purpose of Board of Education meetings is for the board to conduct its business. Board meetings are held in public, but are not public forums. Community members who contacted the superintendent in advance of the meeting may be provided an opportunity to speak first pursuant to Board Policy 0169.1. The board agenda will have 2 public participation sections. The first public participation of the board agenda is specifically designed for the public to address the board with their comments related to the agenda items for that meeting. This portion of the meeting shall be limited to 30 minutes unless extended by vote of the board. The second public participation section of the board's agenda is specifically designated for the public to address the board with their comments related to non-agenda items. This second opportunity for public comment shall be after the completion of all action items on the agenda. This portion of the meeting shall be limited to 15 minutes unless extended by vote of the board. The board may permit individuals to attend meetings remotely through live broadcast. However, public participation will be limited to those who are in attendance at the meeting site only. The board is not responsible for any technology failures that prevent or disrupt any individual from attending remotely. Each participant will have 3 minutes to speak. No person may speak twice until all who desire to speak have had the opportunity to do so. Remember, this is a formal and official meeting of the board, and what you say becomes part of the official meeting report. If your comment involves a problem with a student, employee, or board member, please do not address them by name. Keep in mind we are meeting in a schoolhouse and possibly in the presence of students. Following your public comment, if you have specific questions, please email the superintendent at jennifer.penzarski@chagrinschools.org.
Okay. First up, we have Lindsay Self.
Lindsay Self, 1433 Bell Road. I was disheartened to read the resignation letter of Rachel Jones submitted December 9th, 2024. I could tell you what a loss it is at Gurney to no longer have Dr. Jones or Sarah Reed in the building. I could tell you about all of the calls with Sarah Reed after school hours to help me navigate a wild child in his early years of school. I could tell you about the time when Dr. Jones painted the second grade bathroom after receiving a very well-researched letter from my second grader on the social and emotional impact of drab colors on children. But I think that Dr. Jones's letter highlights something larger, and which we've heard before, the staff's lack of trust in district leadership. Our superintendent was hired around August 2021 on a 3-year contract. State law allowed for the board to consider whether to extend that contract between January 2023 and March 2024 for a statutory maximum term of 5 years. The board voted to extend that contract at nearly the earliest time, February of 2023, and for the maximum term allowed by law. This is surprising because just 3 months later, in May 2023, the teachers' unions voted no confidence in our superintendent, citing 2 years of issues, demonstrating an overall failing to build and maintain relationships with staff. For argument's sake, I'm going to assume that our superintendent is working magic behind the scenes, crafting impressive and innovative curriculum, but that's not the only essential function of a superintendent. Communication and collaboration is an Ohio standard for superintendents, which the Ohio Board of Ed describes as, quote, establishing and maintaining effective relationships with school personnel. Our superintendent echoed this sentiment to the Chagrin Sun in 2021, saying it's, quote, critical to have a, quote, strong culture. And the board stated that building authentic and genuine relationships was what impressed them most about the superintendent during her interview. The teachers have been consistent. The superintendent has not met that expectation, and under this type of leadership, they are considering leaving the district altogether. Trust them. A school board has the ability to terminate a superintendent's contract for just cause, but there is no indication that the board considered whether the vote amounted to such. There is a reason connection is a theme in our strategic plan, and that extends to every level of leadership in this district. I ask this board to commit to assessing whether the superintendent is meeting the essential functions of her position, and if not, whether there is just cause to terminate her contract. The superintendent has been criticized for aggressively reviewing and assessing staff, so I'm certain she will welcome the same level of accountability to be applied to her. Thank you.
Next up is Kit Rossi.
I cannot follow that. 100% cannot follow that. That was amazing. Good job. You're much more fun. No, thanks. Hi, I'm Kit Rossi. I don't love this. Hi, I'm Kit Rossi. I have two kids, one that graduated in the class of 2023 from Chagrin, and I have a freshman. So I come just as a mom, but also a taxpayer. So I have a very similar message here. And one of the things we all love about Chagrin, otherwise we wouldn't live here, because there's plenty of good school districts, right? Plenty of good school districts around here. But we live in Chagrin for the warm and fuzzy. We live in Chagrin for this kind of appearance at a school board meeting. We live in Chagrin for our teachers. I mean, no offense to every administrator, and shout out to the principal, Amanda and Mrs. Ross. They're the best. But in general terms, we're here for the teachers. I appreciate all that y'all do, because you've all taken time, for the most part, and had a personal meeting with me over your time, and that means so much to me, and it speaks huge volumes to me as a taxpayer, as a mom, and somebody who is relatively involved in schools through the Booster Club, the PTO, all that jazz, since we moved here in the 3rd grade. I would just like to say, since the teachers had a vote of no confidence, I haven't seen any changes. And maybe they're happening behind the scenes. I don't know. I'm not here to make an accusation. I'm here to make an observation. Because there's a difference in being good on paper, and there's a difference in being good on person. And I understand there is some significance to being good on paper, and every school district needs to have that, right? We're good on paper. But are we good in person? Are we taking the time to hear from our teachers? What's going on in your life? Are you everything okay? Because we're all better when we feel connected. And I'm not a teacher, so I don't know. I can't speak for the teachers, but I've sat in board meetings. I've had conversations. I've read emails. And I do think that there is a great disconnect with our teachers, who are outstanding. That's pretty much all I've got. I hope that you'll take that into account. It's more to be in a good district than being good on paper. There's plenty of good schools out there, good on paper. We live here. We pay taxes in a very small district. We serve our community. We serve our school districts. We pass levies. We're an involved community. So I just would hope that the teachers feel the same on their end, that y'all are involved. Thank you.
Next is Anthony Avancic? Okay. Sorry.
It's always a struggle. I should just come up with a new last name. So good evening, board members and community members. I too was compelled to be here tonight to speak about the resignation letter that I read. This will be a different side of the coin than what you've heard so far. So I'm here tonight to speak to parents who are afraid to voice their concerns, parents who have been silenced or ignored under the current principal's leadership at Gurney. Since the start of the 2024 school year, her presence and oversight have been nothing short of absent. Responsibilities have been neglected, and critical issues have gone unresolved because she simply hasn't shown up, to the point where she has explicitly asked parents to not involve her. The most egregious example is when my student's Section 504 plan, which is protected under the Americans with Disability Act, was unintentionally violated, an incident that literally put my child's life at risk. And what did the Gurney principal do? Nothing. No urgency, no accountability, no empathy. She couldn't even be bothered to return a parent's phone call. Let that sink in. The child's safety was compromised, and leadership's response was silence, despite me speaking to her face to face on the day of, and she assured me she would return a phone call to me the very next day. Still haven't heard back. This is the current Gurney culture that you all are speaking about under her decades of leadership. But this is not just about one incident, it's about the culture she has fostered under her watch. The school has become teacher-leaning to the point of excluding parents and students. Teachers have been left unchecked, and the result is a culture of entitlement where parents are ignored and our concerns are dismissed. Feels like the principal has prioritized the convenience of educators over the well-being of our children. Let's talk about what kindergarten parents see, as well as other parents at Gurney. A checked out principal whose involvement seems to start and stop at scanning QR codes at pickup. That's her legacy as of today, a legacy of absentee leadership and neglect. You all may have experienced something different, I have not. Our children deserve a leader who shows up, a leader who listens, a leader who puts safety and accountability and a collaboration first. This principal has failed to do that in my eyes. Gurney deserves better, and we as parents will demand better. I stand here tonight and ask parents to speak up and share their experiences on whatever side of the coin you may land. Don't be afraid of retaliation. The board can only know what parents share, and to the board and to the superintendent, please go in a new direction with this new principal. Please involve the parents in the community with your hiring process and help change the culture at Gurney Elementary for the better. Thank you.
Last up is Dana Bordner.
This is weird. I don't like it. I know. Good evening. Thank you for having me. We have seen stories written and posts on social media portraying Dr. Pinzarski in an unfavorable manner. I can only speak for Steve and me, but our experiences with her have been extremely positive. We have met with Dr. Pinzarski a half a dozen times during her tenure, at times to voice concerns and at times to better understand the ways in which the district is improving academic offerings and curriculum for our kids. Dr. Pinzarski is extremely passionate about providing excellence for our students and our teachers. We are excited about the long-term vision and future for Chagrin Falls, which has been shaped by the strategic planning process she implemented upon her arrival. Many voices were heard. While our ratings remain high over other Ohio schools, data shows we have been missing the mark in several key areas. But thankfully, we have specifically seen, Steve and I, a positive difference in fourth grade ELA from 2 years ago until this year. The growth and hard work by Sandra, Mandy, Katie, and Corey is exciting. And my girls had all of them. There are issues Steve and I still would like addressed or changed, and I'm sure others in our community would too. We would like things to be implemented faster and discipline dealt with more adequately and consistently from building to building. Unfortunately, in today's society, we want things done yesterday, and that's unrealistic in public school. But I think we can move forward and just focus on the positive changes already taking place in our district. Certain state bills passed have helped with higher academic standards and choices so our district can have a little more control. We have a truly unique town, and this is why we all live here. We can come together, and if you have questions or concerns or are looking for more transparency, I would encourage you to meet with Dr. Pinzarski. She has always been willing to address any topic and listen. In years past, our district didn't have enough accountability in place, and today we have better checks and balances. We have our community as a whole and Dr. Pinzarski to thank for that. Thank you. Oh, Dana Bordner, 401 Deer Court. Thanks.
Is that it? Since a lot of that had to do with the board, I'm just going to make a quick comment. The hardest thing for me about this job is that this community has an expectation that everybody gets along all the time and that everything is very shiny. And that's great. And like Kit said, you know, people move here because they want to feel good about the community. The reality, in my experience, is that we have competing groups with competing interests. We have the union, we have parents who advocate zealously, as they should, for their kids. The unions advocate zealously for the staff, as they should. We have 85% of our homeowners and households do not have children in our schools. So
We have financial limitations. We have to balance limited resources. They have a separate voice. We have 6 different municipalities, all with different tax structures. We have people with conservative views. We have people with liberal views. In fact, that's what I loved about the district for my kids. It was that there's a lot of different people with a lot of different views, and balancing and keeping all of that up in the air is the challenge that our central office and the board faces. So we really appreciate the feedback, and the challenge, of course, is one of those voices can get amplified on social media, and then it looks like it can just take the perspective, we see things much more broadly, and that's our job. But I just caution people, I know we have a really educated community, and I know people are really sophisticated, but when you see things blow up on social media, that's one piece of the story. And we're all here, we all take calls, we all take emails, reach out, happy to talk to anybody at any time, but that's our challenge. So, thank you. And I think that's it. Anything else?
That's the next meeting.
Okay. Our next meeting, and we're going to have a meeting on the 22nd, because as you can see, there's only 4 of us. And we're still open, by the way, for people who, after all of this, would love to join us and be our 5th board member. We're eager to meet you. Applications until the 21st. They close at 3 o'clock. We are going to have a meeting on the 22nd, but it is only going to be executive session. So there won't be any public comment. We're just meeting to select the next board member. And I think that's it. So I move to adjourn the January 15th regular meeting. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ashley?
Mrs. Bendel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Sabo?
Yes.
Thank you for coming.